Good morning, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for today's webinar, which is presented in partnership with Anglicare Victoria. So before we begin, I want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land I'm joining you from today, the Larrakia people here in Darwin. I pay my respects to elders, past and present, and extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples joining us from across the country. Please feel free to share the country you're joining from in the chat. Today's conversation takes us to the heart of what it means to truly include children and young people. It's about more than hearing their voices. It's about creating spaces where trust, safety, and collaboration thrive. So a bit of housekeeping: all webinars are recorded and will be posted on our website in the coming weeks. The chat function is enabled for questions, so please feel free to submit them throughout the session, and we'll answer as many as we can at the end of the webinar. This webinar is in listen-only mode, so all participants are muted except for our panelists. Closed captions can be enabled by clicking the CC icon on your screen. If you experience any issues, please refer to the FAQs or contact the support details in the chat. This webinar aligns with Children's Week, which is being celebrated with events across Australia this week. It's 35 years this year since Australia signed the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. And this year's Children's Week theme is based on Article 42, which states that everyone should know about children's rights. And it's something really important that we're talking about here today. The webinar also forms part of NAPCAN's National Child Protection Week webinar series. While National Child Protection Week has passed, our message continues. Child protection is everyone's business. This year's campaign theme, Every Conversation Matters, reminds us that awareness is only the first step. Real change happens when we shift conversations into action. Today's discussion will touch on topics relating to child protection, including challenges faced by children, families, and frontline workers. Please take care of your wellbeing, step away if you need to, and reach out for support. Our NAPCAN team is available behind the scenes, and contact details for support services are in the chat. Thank you again for being here. Let's get started by meeting our incredible panelists. We're joined by three remarkable speakers today who bring unique perspectives, from community coordination and trauma-informed practice to lived youth advocacy. Together, we'll explore what it looks like when children are not just participants but partners in shaping the environments around them. We'll move through three parts today: understanding the challenge, what gets in the way of genuine inclusion, strategies and approaches, what's working on the ground, and finally, looking forward, how can we embed children's voices in everyday practice? To begin, let's explore part one, understanding the challenge. Before we can talk about what works, it's really important to recognise the barriers, misconceptions, and everyday realities that stop children from feeling heard or safe. Ellen, you've been deeply involved in the Safer Communities for Children community approach to protective behaviours and wellbeing. Could you introduce yourself briefly and tell us what challenges do you see in creating physically and emotionally safe environments for children? And how has the Safer Communities for Children approach helped with this?
Thank you so much, Merrin, and hi everyone, and thank you all for being here to discuss this important topic with us. My name's Ellen Wachter, and I'm the Communities for Children Coordinator for Greater Dandenong plus 3177. And I live, work and raise my little one on beautiful Bunurong country in southeast Melbourne. It's very rainy at the moment. In the Safer Communities for Children program, I worked alongside a group of children in 4-year-old kinder, the overwhelming majority of which both parents were not born in Australia, and the children spoke multiple languages at home with their family. Many of the children had experienced periods of time in the care of adults other than their parents, most with at least one experience of significant trauma, whether that be the upheaval of a refugee, asylum seeker or migrant experience. Greater Dandenong is a humanitarian settlement area. So in the aftermath of the fall of Kabul to the Taliban, we had a lot of families literally go to sleep in one country and wake up in another. So we have a lot of complex trauma that our young people are working through with their families. So I just wanted to share that this is the context within which this program was delivered, and why the centre, when asked, this is the Kinder Centre that is, when asked during a regular community consultation what their needs were, requested, or really sadly pleaded for this additional support for their children, because we know across the sector we need more resourcing to be able to support the workers, to support the families that need it. So when it comes to this Safer Communities for Children protective behaviours approach, the challenge that immediately comes to my mind in creating physically and emotionally safe environments for children and young people is that unfortunately organisations inherently are risk averse. And this can sometimes, without meaning to, be to the detriment of children and young people who have a right to a safe environment. Often when we talk or hear others talk about the risk in working with children, or saying something to children that might trigger them or give an idea that we feel like is inappropriate for their age. I've been working in this space for a while now, and I really think we need to flip that notion on the head and consider the risk if we don't work with children and we don't consult with them, rather than the risk if we do. In my experience, there is a much greater risk of harm to children if we don't work with them than if we do, even if the work that we plan doesn't go as planned, which it really does, unfortunately. What this looks like in practice is delivering a program like Safer Communities for Children, where you are delivering content that shouldn't, but may involve disclosures from children and young people. And facilitators delivering this program when they might not have done anything like this before, I certainly haven't, and not knowing what experience the young people may have had in the past when you're walking into that room. What it also looks like is advocating to your people leaders and senior leaders that despite the risks in doing this work, the risks of not doing this work is greater. So if a child does make a disclosure, we can use protective interrupting, which the Safer Communities for Children program manual supports us in doing. We believe the young person and continue the conversation later and ensure that support structures are in place for them. It also looks like sharing with your people leader that yes, there is risk, but isn't it better that a child does make a disclosure and gets the help than we don't deliver the program and the child doesn't have an opportunity, even though this program is very clearly designed, and I will touch on it, and I think Jen will as well, to deliberately distance children from any trauma they may have experienced. Sometimes I think it's also really helpful to spell this out, make it really hard for your organisation to say no, align this program with your child-safe policies and procedures. In working with very young children from under-resourced communities, where there are multiple experiences of trauma, ensuring that the children felt safe in the kinder room where I was a stranger, albeit a safe stranger, that's how I was described as the kinder teacher, was really essential. I asked the kinder teacher to introduce me, which gave me some clout, and I thanked them, as in the children, for letting me in their kinder room. I tried to reduce the power imbalance as much as possible. I sat on the floor with the children. I had multiple session plans and pivoted when something didn't land. And we had a lot of dance breaks when our little bodies needed a physical break. It's a long time to sit for little people. The kinder teacher stayed with us the whole time and participated in the activities, and they supported the children who needed additional support. All of these strategies were very simple. They're not rocket science, but in combination, they're incredibly powerful in creating a safe space, which is essential when discussing anything, but particularly messages about safety and children's rights. Thanks, Maren.
Thanks, Ellen. Look, I love how you've highlighted that the risk of not involving children is actually greater than including them in ways that are meaningful and inclusive. Genevieve, could you introduce yourself briefly and share what you see as the biggest barriers services face when they try to move from listening to actually acting on children's voices?
Yeah, thanks for that, Maren. Hi, everyone. I'm Jen, and I am a social worker currently working as a project worker with the Cardinia Communities for Children program with Anglicare Victoria. I have the privilege of working on the Bonwurrung country of the Kulin Nation. And for a bit of context, Cardinia Shire is approximately about 40 kilometres out of Melbourne CBD, where there are a lot of rural and farming communities. So to address the question of the biggest barriers services face, I think it is when we do not listen to children with a child's lens perspective. We tend to listen to children with an adult lens. And I think that is like one of the fundamental barriers there. Although we are very well meaning, we do have our agendas that we throw in there when we are speaking to children. Adults have a belief that because we are older, therefore we know better than children about what is good for them. We also forget that we have the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of the Child, like you mentioned, Maren, and we don't actually often use it or refer to it when we plan services and programs for children. I'm thinking specifically Article 12. Children have the right to give their opinion and for adults to listen and take it seriously. This article asks us to involve children in the conversation, to involve them in the planning and designing, in assessment, goal setting, implementation, and even the evaluation side of it, especially when we are creating something for children. Children have an invaluable wisdom about the world around them and what is important to them. And when they are empowered to know their rights and given the space to understand these and practice these with safe adults and safe communities, then they can share some really important insights with us. When we share our power with children and authentically listen to their voices, we have better outcomes for them and with them. So when I have run the Safer Communities sessions with our children, we always start with the exploration and discussion about the rights of the child. What's surprising is a lot of these students are actually not familiar and not aware of their rights. So what's really wonderful though is in that space they are able to like speak their minds and really explore what those rights mean for them. So we get really robust and curious conversations. During that time, we actively listened to the children about how they wanted to learn about the topics and themes, and activated their voices by allowing them to shape the activities to suit their interests and their learning styles. This dynamic set up a really good trusting relationship that we were able to sustain for the duration of the program. And we learned a lot from those kids. We learned about what safety looks like and feels like to them, what safe adults look like, and what helps them when they feel unsafe, and who and where they go to for support. When we completed the end of the program, they do a questionnaire, and the students clearly demonstrated that they had achieved the learning goals from the program. They were able to do this successfully because we, the adults, actually listened to their voices, not just how they wanted these sessions to be conducted, but deeply engaged in what they shared with us. This helped them to feel valued, and they thrived because of it.
Thanks, Jen. Such an important focus on supporting children to know about their rights, but also to shape their program and the activities, and I liked your focus on taking a child-led perspective rather than an adult-led perspective around our own agendas. Really important. Thank you. And now to Mariana. Mariana, could you please introduce yourself and tell us, as a young advocate, what do you see as the challenges that prevent young people from feeling genuinely included in shaping decisions that affect them?
Thanks, Maren. Hi, everyone. My name is Mariana, and I'm joining from Wajak Noongar country. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm really happy to be joining with you all today. I'm currently studying a Bachelor's of Electrical Engineering at Curtin University. Alongside my studies, I'm a NatCan Youth Speak Out member, being privileged to be part of indifferent consultations, as well as the media campaign that is out now. When I think about the challenges that prevent young people from being genuinely included in decision-making, I see three main ones. The first one is tokenism. Too often, young people are brought into the room, but the more important decisions have already been made. We're asked for input, but it feels more like a ticking the box type of exercise than genuine opportunity to shape outcomes. For example, I've been part of sessions where youth were asked to give feedback on a project, but the design was already locked in. It's discouraging because it makes you feel like your perspective isn't really valued, just showcased. The second is accessibility. Decision-making spaces aren't always designed with young people in mind. That can mean things as simple as meetings being scheduled during school or work hours, or the language being used is very technical and full of jargon. For some young people, cultural or socioeconomic barriers also add another layer, making the spaces and them feel making the spaces feel very professional and not for them. I know that even for me, as someone who is relatively confident, there are moments where the formality of the session makes it harder to speak up honestly. And finally, there is a challenge of trust. Young people want to know that if we take the risk of speaking up, our voices will actually count. When you don't see the outcome of your contribution, or you notice that your feedback disappears into a black box, it creates a sense of, why bother? Trust needs to be built by showing us how our ideas are influencing change, even in small ways. So for me, the challenge isn't just getting young people into the room, it's creating an environment where we're treated as partners. That's what makes inclusion genuine rather than just symbolic.
Yeah. Thanks, Mariana. So your 3 points, around tokenism, and I think, there are, can think of many occasions where young people and children have been invited to provide feedback or to contribute to something, and it is like a tick the box that their responses or their voices are not really valued, but they're just showcased. And the importance of accessibility, and helping young people feel safe and welcome when we're using those approaches, and also the value of trust, because it really does, there is a risk, and it does take courage for young people to speak out. So we need to make sure that we value those voices. So thank you all for those reflections. We're now going to move into part 2, strategies and approaches. This is where we shift to what's working, the practical tools, partnerships, and cultural shifts that are helping create safer and more inclusive spaces for children. Ellen, from your work with Safer Communities for Children, what practical strategies have worked best in helping children recognise and express their right to safety?
So many. I think what was really heartening in reflecting on this question is that there are so many ways that work is being done. And I think people are very generous with sharing what's worked for them. So for context, Jen and I actually work together across the region in our separate communities, and Jen and her team were instrumental in supporting me with the delivery of this program, and so was Merrin. But to get back to the question, the really helpful and beautiful thing about this Stronger Communities for Children program, which I encourage you all to look at the website and get trained in, is that it gives you really clear guidance on how to speak about the rights of children and how to help children not only understand at a cognitive level, but also recognise and express these rights, particularly to safety. I think with the child safe standards and a focus on children's rights, which is fantastic, I think it really leans into what Mariana said around tokenism. We all have to display the rights of the child in our workplace, but do adults understand them? Do children understand them? What does it actually mean? And how do we actually enact those for young people? So I think one of the really practical strategies that worked well is the use of the 7 bush animal stories that make up this program. Each has a specific message about safety that reinforces community responsibility in valuing and protecting children. So the use of the bush animal stories is very deliberate and intentional because it distances the child from relating to the feelings of discomfort and lack of safety that the animal in the story experiences. So when I spoke before about protective interrupting and the risk of disclosures, this is one of the things that NAPCAN has done very deliberately in order to have these conversations in a safe and respectful way without triggering young people who we know overwhelmingly have had these experiences of trauma and lack of safety. So where some children's programs are related to safety focus on the ways that children can work towards creating and maintaining their own physical safety, this program is unique, and it's really, really beautiful in being very clear that children do not have a responsibility to keep themselves safe. The responsibility is on the community. It is on everyone in the community, not just parents, not just friends of parents. It is on the person walking down the street. It is on the person in the shop. It is the responsibility of all adults in the community. This is key. It should not be the fault or the blame or the shame of a child if an adult makes a choice that makes them unsafe and puts them in an unsafe situation. This is really central to this program, and I think it's incredibly unique and something that I don't hear more of. So another thing that worked really well was bringing the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child every week into these sessions, sharing it in the take-home sheets that went home with the children to the parents every week, and referring to it in the bush stories every week. This repetition with anyone is helpful, but with little people, I worked with 4-year-olds, key. It's absolutely essential. What was really heartening, as Jen said before, was that children had a really deep understanding of safety, even in the pre-survey, even in the pre-questionnaire, from the very literal understanding of seatbelts, traffic lights, swimming between the flags, to the uneasy and uncomfortable feeling when someone says something to you that you can't really articulate why it's not right, but it makes you feel a bit yuck. The young people could very easily share their own safe places, people and things, from teddies to cuddling up in bed, as well as things they could say to let grown-ups know that they didn't feel safe. Things like, I don't like it, it makes my tummy feel funny, I don't feel safe, literally yelling stop. Very helpful. This was not new language to these young people. They had a language already that had been supported by the kinder services that they were engaged in. I think what my role was to hear the young people reiterate that they do have a right to safety, that grown-ups need to be the ones to keep them safe, and that there are always safe people to speak to if someone makes them feel unsafe. I think, again, as Jen and Mariana said very succinctly, the biggest thing we can do as workers and adults is to be quiet and stop talking. I'm a talker, and it can be really hard sometimes. As Jen said, you're really well-meaning and you want to help. You don't want to do the wrong thing. But often helping is being quiet, holding space, and showing that you're listening, and not just listening tokenistically and to provide feedback, but listening because you're genuinely curious as to what these young people say and about their experiences, and believing them and not minimizing their experience, because their experience is valid. This can give us real insight into the experiences of young people and what safety looks like to them. So it's really heartening that that's just some of the ways, but I could talk about it forever and I won't. So I'll pass back to you, Merrin.
Okay. Thanks, Ellen. That was great. So Genevieve, how does a trauma-informed approach shift the way services create spaces where children feel safe to participate and to lead?
Okay, so I want to first just quickly define those two approaches you talked about. The trauma-informed approach, a framework that where we recognize the impact on trauma on individuals and communities, guides services in a way that creates safety both in interpersonal interaction and the environment, and it's used to prevent harm, prevent distress, and re-traumatization. With that in mind, it goes hand in hand with a child-centered approach, which prioritizes the needs, wishes, the safety of children, and supporting children to actively participate in decision-making. I think when services operate under a trauma-informed framework, they already have the foundations to develop into developing safe spaces for children. Adding that layer of child-centered lenses on elevates opportunities for children to actively participate and take the lead. Services adapt to ensure that those spaces are inclusive to, cultural diversity, ability, gender, sexuality, and trauma. This should naturally also extend to children. When we did the Safer Communities for Children program, I'm going to echo what Ellen has said. The design itself already embeds a beautiful blend of trauma-informed approach and child-focused practices. In that, we built relationship with students, authentically built it. We were responsive to the needs and wants of the children. Like Ellen said, if the children needed a break, we gave them a little brain break. If we had to dance it off or have a little shake off, we did that. If they looked at an activity and said, hey, we would like to adapt it and do something else, but it also satisfied what they needed to learn, they got the opportunity for creative freedom. We authentically engaged in discussion. Whatever they were keenly interested in, we went with it. We explored that further. We approached challenging behaviors with curiosity. We didn't judge. We asked them how they needed us to support them better. And I know Ellen touched on disclosures, and when that happened in the group, we wanted to make sure that they knew we heard them, but also keep the safety of the wider group there. So we did that. We managed those situations, but it was never at the expense of telling a child that what they said didn't matter. Although the program was actually designed for 4 to 6-year-olds in mind, Cardinia Communities for Children made the decision to offer it to Year 6 students, to schools who were interested across Cardinia Shire. And the thought was that if the Year 6 students completed the program, they could also be our champions and teach the rest of the student body. So each week when we learned something, in the same week, they went off to the different cohorts they were assigned to and rolled out the program with them. So the following week, when we reunited, they shared their experience of teaching the preps to Year 5s about what we'd been learning. They shared their highlights, their challenges, and what they thought was interesting. They invested in their role. When we had our sessions together, students were taking notes and engaging in conversation, sharing their ideas, asking us about whether or not their ideas would go really well with the younger cohorts, and would it address the themes and topics. So they were deeply engaged in it. One of the schools in Cardinia even wrote an article about their experience in the local paper. That same cohort of Year 6 students was also nominated for Cardinia's Good Citizen Award that very same year. In another school, we received feedback from teachers that the Year 6 students who had participated in the program showed more confidence and demonstrated more participation in their student leadership roles, both formally and informally. Feedback from another school said that their students, especially those who were perceived to be a little bit more challenging, demonstrated more pro-social engagement in the school community. Friendship groups were more cohesive and they were more engaged in their learning, and even extracurricular activities offered at the school. When we practice with a trauma-informed and child-focused lens and provide a safe space for children to practice this, they are better able to explore and practice their capabilities, included being able, and that includes being able to lead and participate in a more conscious way in their lives and the world around them.
Great, thanks, Jen. Mariana, what strategies have helped you and the young people you work with feel safe? Because you mentioned before about feeling safe to speak up. What strategies have helped you and young people you work with feel safe to speak up and to contribute meaningfully?
Thanks, Maren. When I think about strategies that really make a difference, I come back to my own experiences as a student and youth advocate. Again, there are 3 approaches that I've seen work well, simple, but yeah, powerful. The most effective spaces are the ones where young people are treated as equals. That doesn't mean ignoring that we're still learning, but it means recognizing that our lived experiences are still valid expertise. Something as basic as sitting in a circle rather than a hierarchy, or making sure introductions put everyone at the same level can change the whole atmosphere. It signals that your voice matters just as much as anyone else's here. Secondly, I can't overstate how much it helps when adults drop the jargon. Whether it's in engineering, policy, social services, technical terms can be intimidating. When people use plain language, give us context, and check in to see if we're understanding, it makes it easier to contribute without feeling embarrassed. I've had times in lectures or consultations where I didn't know a technical term or an acronym, but I didn't want to interrupt. So I sat there trying to figure it out, playing it over and over in my head. The best facilitators are the ones that notice that and take the pressure off. Personally, I have felt most confident speaking up when I wasn't the only young person in the room as well. Seeing your peers there, knowing that you can lean on each other, makes you feel braver. At the same time, having mentors who are genuinely invested in listening and then showing how your ideas are acted upon is incredibly validating. For example, within NISO, I've had leaders and staff who would come back to us after consultations and explain exactly how our suggestions have been taken on board. That kind of feedback loop makes you feel like you're valued and safe to keep engaging because you can see the tangible impact of your voice.
Great, thanks. I'm just jotting down the main points that you made, because I think, and I know you're mainly talking about young people, but I'm also thinking of, down to very young children, that, some of the points you made are around treating children and young people as equals, recognising obviously that there are differences, but that their voice matters as much as the voices of adults, using plain language and checking in for understanding and validating that, and seeing, and I hear this time and again, about young people say, I want to see people like me there as well. I don't want to be the only person representing a whole group of people, to see peers there and to have mentors and adults that really value what you have to say. And also to get that feedback on if you have contributed something, then what's happening with those contributions and where has it gone and how is it being used. So thanks very much, Mariana. Really fantastic reflections. So we've heard some great examples of what's working. So now we're going to look ahead. So in part 3, looking forward, we're going to explore how to embed these approaches into everyday practice. So it's okay to talk about things as, happening once or twice, but how do we do that in an everyday way? And to take a look at what success really looks like when children's voices are central. So Ellen, how do you see families, schools and community organisations working together to embed the principles from Safer Communities for Children into everyday practice?
Everyone has to be on board. You cannot do this work alone. You just can't. You cannot. I was fortunate that when delivering this program, I had the support of the kinder service, my colleagues, the teachers, Merrin, Jen. There was a lot of people behind the scenes supporting just with the delivery of this program, brainstorming different concepts. How can we get this to land? What does this look like? This isn't quite right. I think that's essential. Firstly, everyone has to be on board. How to do that is challenging and it takes a lot of work. I know that sometimes, and I'm going to try really hard not to be jargony here for you, Mariana, but we often talk about outcomes and outputs. So outputs as what we're doing, the things that's being done, and the outcomes, the results of what's being done. And I think sometimes when we're focused on outputs and we're focused on, well, we did this thing, outcomes take time. Building relationships with young people take time. Building relationships with kinder services and schools, they take time. And I think when we're trying to get these practices to become everyday practices, we need to make the time for them. And making the time for them shows that they are priority, they are non-negotiable. And I think that can be really hard sometimes. So I think that's one of the strategies I would say that's essential is everyone has to be on board. You have to make the time. The relationships is where this work will be done. That's where those outcomes happen. You could visit every week for the year. But if you're not coming in curious, like Jen said, if you're not coming in authentically and willing to listen, like Mariana said, this work is not going to happen. People are not going to engage and you're not going to get those outcomes. And we do this work and NAPCAN does this work and Safer Communities for Children program exists because there are so many children living in unsafe environments, and we are trying to stop that. We are trying to give children a language, let them know about these rights that exist to support them. We're trying to support them to move beyond that. We're trying to really support the adults around them to recognize that. Some of the ways that we did that, what that looked like in our context, was that these are kinder age children, and I'm the parent of a kinder age child, and I know what it's like having my child come home from kinder and say, oh, someone came and talked to us today about something, and I'll be thinking, I have no idea who came and talked to my child. I have no idea what they spoke to them about, and you end up really confused. So I was really cognizant of that. So to combat that, we created take-home sheets to take home to the parents, the carers, the families. These take-home sheets we did each week after each session. They contained a blurb about the program. So again, that repetition. They included a picture of us, who we were, what we do, why we were here. And it also had a little snapshot about the story we read and the conversations we had. The Kinder also posted this take-home page on their internal communications platform for the parents to access if the take-home page went missing in Kinder bags, as happens. This meant that if children went home and said, someone came to speak to us about Kenny Kangaroo's dad who didn't listen to him and that's bad, the parents had a way to understand what their child was talking about and to be able to continue that conversation. So we also included some conversation prompts directly from the NAPCAN program manual for this program that parents might like to use with their children that related to the stories and the topics to keep those conversations going. Each take-home page also included a copy of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of the Child, which we spoke to the children about at each session. I will own that a limitation of these take-home sheets was that they were only in English due to funding limitations and allocations for translating material, which did limit the effectiveness of these sheets. We did leave a copy of each bush story that we did each week with the Kinder service, and they did reread the stories during the week. And the children really engaged with that. Again, that repetition of supporting those messages. What was really important to us was that we left the children in a better place than when we found them. And by that, what I mean is we were very aware that by giving these young people a language around rights and the adult responsibility to enact them, we didn't want to leave them in a worse space. So we didn't work with the adults. We didn't work with their parents and their carers, and they didn't receive the same information that we were sharing. So likely many of the parents and adults were not aware of or didn't have a great understanding of the Conventions on the Right of the Child and shared community responsibility for child safety. So we really didn't want to build these children up to proclaim their rights at home to parents who said, no, you don't have a right to that, because they weren't familiar with the convention. So we communicated this with the Kinder, and they supported us in how we could continue these conversations with the parents in the Kinder and how we might be able to communicate these in the sheets that went home. Like Jen, we have a lot of anecdotal information. We know that at least 2 of the parents really appreciated the take-home sheets and shared that they didn't know about the rights or shared adult responsibility. They knew that parents and family and close family friends had a responsibility, but the idea of having people in the street, people in shops, people in libraries, places that we all access, being responsible for their child's safety and well-being was really heartening and really positive and really indicative of these outcomes that are happening for children and their families. Moving forward, it would obviously be essential that if we were to do this program again, which I hope we do, we have funding for these materials to be translated into the languages these young people speak at home, and to host an event at the cessation of the program to share with the parents, carers, families, and ideally broader community about the messages from the program that the children shared with us about where they feel safe, who they feel safe with, and how they communicate their feelings of safety and discomfort to those around them. Because I think really that is where the broader work needs to be done. where people in services who don't live and work with children, I think children's services know that children have these rights and that they need to centre children. I think where there is a gap that we can all work to fill is services that don't work with children, and then don't consider children. But if we're working with parents, parents have children. Everyone was a child at some point. We do have this responsibility to prioritise, recognise and consider. And as Mariana said, ask the question. Talk to the child. You know, if we're working in practice that is hoping to shift adult behaviour, that's going to have an impact on a child, whether it's a child in their home or a child elsewhere. So getting back to your original point, how do I see them all working together? It's taking the time, making it a priority, and really doing your best to get everyone on board. And if that's having conversations with your people leaders, adding it to regular meeting agendas, keeping the conversation going so that it becomes embedded as part of practice and not an add-on. Oh yeah, you work with children's services, so you work with children. No. Children are a priority for us all. They are part of the community. They live in this world. They live in our homes. They go to schools. They need to have a role, and we need to listen to what they're saying. And as Mariana said, action it. And if we can't action it, feedback why. They are entities, active participants in civic society in their different ways, as we all are. And we need to be cognizant of that.
Great, thanks, Ellen. Look, I think some of your key points are around, if we're wanting to build it in, to the culture of organisations and the way we all work and be with children. It's allowing time to build those relationships and be curious and authentic. Involve everyone, as many people in children's lives as possible, so that we're all communicating the same values for listening to children and the emphasis on their rights. And yeah, making that a priority. So thanks, Ellen. Genevieve, what would it take for services across the sector to consistently act on children's voices and make that part of the culture?
Okay, thanks, Merritt. So I think first off, we actively need to commit to ensuring opportunities for children are there, that they are included and involved in everything that concerns them. So yes, if we are talking about things like whether it be at Kinder, we're talking about a curriculum that they want to set up for the week or the year, and whether or not we're talking about services and the kind of programs we want to roll out to families. Are children involved in that, in those decision making? Is it something they want? Is it something they need? Also, leave the adult ego out of it. Like I said, I'm sure we're all well-meaning, and like Ellen said, we also have this innate want to protect, but we can do that collaboratively. And it will look like seeking children's ideas, thoughts and voices. Does it look like a student advice, like does it look like a child advisory board or something for services? And are we making sure, are we checking that the systems and structures are actually child friendly? Are they child driven? I think about some settings like school, for instance, they have a school representative council. Is that shaped by adults or by students? Are the structures of the agenda setting and everything, is that an adult or is that a child? And the agendas that are set, are they set by what the adults want, what they think the kids should discuss, or are they shaped by what the students' interests and concerns actually are? It's the simple, it could be, and I'm thinking about Mariana's comment about tokenism. The children who are nominated and selected to participate in the Student Representative Council, do they know in advance when meetings are on, or are they just informed on the day through a PA system first thing in the morning that they have a meeting on? So how involved are we actually how involved are children in these processes? In a service and program setting, I'm thinking things like care team meetings. Do they actually involve the children, or is it just the stakeholders around them? The assessments, are the assessments done in a way that's child friendly? What's the modality of the assessments? Does it meet the age and stage of the child and children that we're meeting with? Goal settings. Is it what we perceive the goals to be for that particular family, that particular child? Or are we involving the children in what they hope for themselves and their family in their future? Are the services themselves, the environment, are they child friendly and inviting? We do the same for other diversities in culture, gender, sexuality, and ability. Are we doing the same for children? Again, going back to the very basics, are we listening to children's voices authentically? I know we have like risk assessments and things to think of, but are children's voices informing those decisions that you're making? Are we hearing them through that child lens? Are we understanding like this particular thing that they're sharing with us? Why is that important to them? And it could mean that we are having to seek, further training in trauma-informed practice, in child-focused practice, and child development. Are we viewing children as capable and valuable humans and as their own entity, their own person, not an accessory to, their family or to their school setting, as themselves? I'm thinking about what Mariana and Alan was saying before about in activating the children's voices. Are we following through with what they've shared with us? Are we coming back to them and saying, hey, this is what I'm going to do, and I'll come back to you and let you know what's going on? Or are we just letting it be? Because kids are pretty good at picking up when people, especially adults, are really listening to them. So if you want to activate and you want to advocate for children, you follow through with that and you actually show the children that way as well. And you keep an open dialogue with them. So whatever decisions are made, hopefully in collaboration, whatever you're doing, you keep them informed. Empowering them by knowing their rights as well, and sharing your power, working collaboratively with them. Again, it goes back to how we view children. Do we accept the fact that, despite being younger, that they have their own unique wisdom, especially when it comes to things that concern children? Yeah. So are we also, and I think the very last thing is, are we, in everything that we do as services, as schools, as programs, delivering for the benefit of children, are we as adults familiar with the United Nations Convention's Rights on the Child as well? Because when we become familiar, we understand it. It is more likely to be second nature when we develop programs or when we want to, shift programs and services as well.
Thanks, Jen. That's great. Look, I've been having a look at some of the questions coming through, and we've realised we didn't really do a bit of an introduction about the Safer Communities for Children approach, so that people don't really know what it is. So Safer Communities for Children is an approach that has been developed in the Northern Territory, and it uses a series of 7 bush animal stories for adults to read to children and have conversations about safety. And a big emphasis within the stories is around learning from children around what helps them feel safe and be safe, and it encourages adults to act on that as well. So they include questions to help children get the big messages out of the stories. There's information for adults to help us understand more about what feeling safe and being safe is like for children and how we can help that. And it introduces things like concepts of consent. So not just giving consent, but seeking consent. So in those really early stages, and it really was originally for children aged from about 4 to 8, And we've actually broadened that. So some children aged around 3 would be able to engage with some of the stories. And as a result of the learnings from Anglicare Victoria, we go, actually, we say up to 10, but it could be older than that as well, the way people can engage with the stories. And they're not only something that you can read to groups of children or run programs with, they've been more recently developed in ways that they can be more standalone. So someone in a library can read a story. They can be used individually with families that you might be doing some intensive work with to help them explore concepts of safety. I think in the chat box that a link to our website's been put in there if anyone's interested. We're actually currently working on the web page, so in about a week it will look heaps better than it looks now. So sorry we didn't have it ready for today, but if anyone's interested, it's being offered in Queensland in the early childhood sector and in the Northern Territory, but if people are interested we can look at how we might be able to offer it interstate as well. So I am just going, and we've got some more questions coming through, but we just thought that would help. Someone's also asked around whether what Mariana's comments would be about the stories, but I don't know that you actually know about the kit, given that it's aimed not at young people, but at children in that lower cohort. So I don't actually think Mariana will know about those stories to be able to make a comment. So let me come down to Mariana's final question, which is, what gives you hope for the future of youth inclusion, and what would real success look like for you?
Yeah, thanks, Maren. What gives me hope is honestly the energy I see from young people around me. In my classes, in communities, online, at NISO, young people are constantly pushing for change, whether it's about climate change, social justice, or new technologies, and sometimes even a mix of all three. We care deeply, and we're creative in how we approach problems. Passion is contagious. I also find hope in the fact that more organizations are starting to recognize the importance of youth voices. For example, more schools are having councils, and community groups are setting up youth advisory boards or allowing youth to lead projects. The very fact I'm even here speaking on this panel shows there is a willingness to move in the right direction. But hope alone isn't enough. For me, reiterating what Ellen and Genevieve have said, real success looks like youth inclusion becoming the default, not the special add-on. That means young people aren't just consulted at the end of the process, but are involved from the very beginning. It means when policies are written or projects are launched, there are young people in the design room, the decision-making community, and the evaluation team. Real success also looks like diversity, not just hearing from the loudest or the most confident youth, but making sure that those who are marginalized, whether by culture, disability, or socioeconomic background, are equally included. Ultimately, success is when decision makers don't ask, should we involve young people, but instead ask, how will we make sure young people are central to this? That's the future I want to see, and that is what keeps me hopeful.
That's great, thank you. And I know from NAPCAN's perspective, since we've had NISO on board, NISO, the NAPCAN Youth Speak Out group, which has representatives from all around, every state and territory around Australia, it's become an integral part of everything we do, all our policies, all our approaches, all our feedback, everything. I don't know what we'd do without NISO now. You know, it's actually just become a part of the way we do everything. So I think that's success. That's certainly been success from NAPCAN's perspective, which has been fabulous. So thank you, everyone. In a moment, we will turn to questions from our audience. So please pop them in the Q&A box and feel free to tell us the context you're working in, whether it's schools, services or community. And I'll select a couple to pose to our panellists so we can hear how these ideas apply in real settings, real world settings. In the meantime, I'd love to bring our panel together for one last time for a quick reflection. So across your different contexts, what does it take to build trust with children and young people? And I actually think this is one of the questions is around sort of how do we really listen to children and young people? So what does it take to build trust with children and young people? And how do we shift these conversations into sustained action? So Ellen, let's start with you.
It's a boring one, but it's so important. Time. You have to take the time and you have to make the time. It's challenging. We all have competing priorities in our personal and professional lives, but we need to prioritize these young people. And we're not going to walk in straight away. Most of the time you're not going to. It's really rare. Let me change that. It's really rare to be able to walk in to a room of anyone, particularly children, and just have rapport straight away. And let's get into the content. Let's cover sections 1, 2, 3, 4, follow the agenda, and then finish 45 minutes later back on track. That doesn't happen. It doesn't happen very often with adults, and it certainly doesn't happen with young people. We need to make the time. If it's a 7-week program, we allowed 10 in case we had to do topics again, in case people weren't feeling well, in case we need to spend a bit more time going over the conventions on the rights of the child. Again, it's not a tick and flick box, as Mariana said before. This sort of stuff takes time, and we have to make that time. We have to build that time in, and we have to also, what's been really essential for me is having the support of my people leader and my organisation to take that time. So I didn't have to push a boulder uphill to have that time allocated to be able to run this activity. It's absolutely key.
Thanks, Ellen. Jen, what are your thoughts?
To echo Ellen, but in addition to time, it's about being authentic. Kids have this natural sense of knowing whether you're genuinely interested in what's going on, and they'll call you on it. They're not afraid to do that. In fact, a lot of the kids who might present as slightly challenging, I'm sorry if you could hear we do have a speaker above here, so I'm sorry if you can't hear that. So it's time, and it's being authentic. Are you genuinely interested? Are you in the space? Are you regulated in the space to actually hear these children? And I also don't think you should take it seriously, because that's what kids want from you. They want to see the person without the ego, without the front. They want to see a person who can make mistakes, who has a personality. And I think that's what's really helped build a relationship. So the time, the authenticity, it's showing that you're truly interested and authentically interested in what they're sharing. Are your follow-up questions to the conversations they're sharing that can deepen the conversations and the trust that you build with young people? I think there was a second part to your question, but I've missed it, Marion. Can you give that?
I'm just going back to my question. Sorry, I'm looking at the other things.
See, this is me being.
What does it take to build trust? How do we shift conversations into sustained action?
So about the sustained action is having those children involved. So it's not a one-off, oh, it's our first session, so let's get to know the kids, but then I've got this agenda for the next 7 to 10 weeks with them. You continue that. You like for sustainable change, you have to sustain that relationship. You cannot just expect that to just be there from the get-go. Every time we come back, because it's a week after we've seen them, it might mean there's a little bit of sillies that we have to work through, and it might mean just, hey, how has your weekend been? But it's refreshing that, because again, and I don't think this is actually any different to any relationship we have that's outside children, whether it's with our colleagues and with our children at home and with our family and friends. A relationship cannot be sustained unless you're actually putting something into it. So continue to include children in those decision making and in the conversation, and continue solidifying that trust.
Thanks, Jen. I'll just repeat the question for you, Mariana. So it's what does it take to build trust with children and young people, and how do we shift conversations into sustained action?
Yep, thanks, Maren. Just adding on to what Ellen and Genevieve have said, I think the two things that stand out to me is transparency and shared power to build trust. I think Ellen mentioned this earlier when she was speaking about how young people can young people feel included when adults are honest about how decisions are made, even if the idea can't be acted on. And more than that, trust deepens when some of the decision-making power is actually shared with the young people. When we move from being consulted to being genuine co-designers, and as Genevieve has said, having that sustainable relationship and having that circle of consultations, not just a one-off consultation. But for me, that's how these conventions turn into sustainable action. It's an ongoing partnership, and it's letting them know that they're part of shaping the outcome and the future.
Thanks, Mariana. I'm just having a look at some of the questions we've got. So thanks everyone for sharing those. There's one here that says, Ellen, you spoke about it being an adult's responsibility to keep children safe. Why do you think we don't talk more about this approach that's around adult responsibility rather than just teaching children about self-protecting? Anyone can comment, but I guess, Ellen, that was sort of directed to you.
Such a great question. Really great question. I actually haven't thought about it before, so I'm going to freestyle a little bit here. Please forgive me. My gut feel is that as adults, sometimes I think we feel a bit of powerlessness. And there are so many things that we can't prevent and we can't stop happening. And I think sometimes to think that we can, if we talk to kids enough and we tell them enough how to look after themselves, it absolves us potentially a bit of the guilt if something happens that we feel is out of our control. And things will always happen, unfortunately, and there is a lot that is out of our control. My gut feel is that we feel like we're helping, or again, without meaning to be patronizing to children, that we're kind of saving them. Oh, if we tell them how to walk this way, if we tell them how to dress this way, if we tell them don't be alone with these people, that we're doing something to prevent these things from happening. And I think there is also that really pervasive understanding that we don't want to talk about something and bring it into existence, that by talking about some of the really awful things that happen. And we know from the Australian Childhood Maltreatment Study, for anyone that's interested and hasn't read it, grim findings, really grim findings about the mistreatment that happens to Australian children. I recommend when you're in a place and time that suits you. But this shows that these things are happening, and we need to be talking to children, and we need to be talking with other adults. Again, I think it's perhaps that idea that if we talk to other adults about how we can stop these things and how we can change our behaviour. No one wants to change their behaviour. No one wants to have another thing on their to-do list. Our to-do lists are full. We're at capacity. We're already doing 3 things at once. So I think it's a combination of all of those things, but also I'm really curious to hear what the others say. So I hope that goes some way to answering your beautiful question.
Thank you. Has anyone got any comments other than that, or should we move on to a different question? Jen, did you have anything you wanted to add to that around why we don't think we talk about adults being responsible for keeping children safe?
I've got a question to that question. So I know it can't be answered, but are we talking about why adults are not having that discussion with each other, or we're not having that discussion with kids? Because that's 2 different things. I think as adults, like Ellen was saying, it's sort of out of mind, out of sight. Things are too big, and there's so many priorities that we already are dealing with as adults. It feels like another big thing. I think about when we've tried to broach subjects like you know, whether it's about online grooming or anything like that, and if it's a program that we offer for parents, parents don't want to touch that space because it is quite big, and are we inviting it, right? But again, also very important that we are across that both children and adults know that we are responsible. We cannot ask like children who innately, just from birth, they already have less power as it is in our community. And I think about when Ellen was talking about how we try to empower and teach our children protective behaviors. And I'm not saying that it's not needed, but I think about, like, if we were looking at this from a gendered view, a family violence sort of thing, it's sort of like victim blaming, isn't it, here? So we're putting all that responsibility on children who are, you know, their brain hasn't developed enough to know all of this and all the dangers, yet expect them to know how to protect themselves. But why are we also expecting kids to know the answers to this and not expect adults to actually learn to be more appropriate with kids and to be able to be protected towards them? So yeah, twofold. I think as adults we do need to be talking and actually saying, no, just because, you know, that child has parents in a family doesn't mean that me at the local shops who see them every day are not obliged to have responsibility over them as well. So yeah, but definitely I think it's like it's a too big question, I think, when we're talking about it being a question for adults.
I've got another question. Someone says, I work for child protection, advocating for children's educational needs. I often find that schools default to it's not part of the curriculum, or they're unwilling to adapt to children's needs. How would you suggest getting schools on board with listening to children's voices and what they need, want, and their interests at school? Who would like to comment on that one?
I'm going to handball that one to Jen, because I very deliberately worked with the kinder service, because in my experience, they tend to be more receptive. I think schools want to be involved, but which person in the school do you go to? Do they have oversight over the other teachers? I personally find it a really time intensive and sometimes, if I'm honest, frustrating process working with schools. And it's not because of individuals' ill intent. It's, again, time pressures and competing priorities. So I deliberately avoided that challenge and was fortunate that this kinder wanted support. So
Jen, got your comments on that around how do we get schools on board with listening to children?
Yeah, it's definitely a process, and I completely understand everything Ellen's saying. I think it goes back to the structure, right? Like our education system, there is so much demand. So it's not about the teaching staff at all. It is what is expected of them, the priorities they are expected to meet for our young people. But I also have found, and it's the same like what I said before about the children, it's if you develop a relationship with the school, and again, that's hard, like Ellen said, because there are so many competing pressures there. But if you happen to get a school where they are on board and happy to work alongside what they need to with their curriculum, but just are flexible enough, have that space to think about, well, how do we go about it? Yes, we have a curriculum to meet, but how can we do this in a way that involves the students a bit more? So it will be that collaboration that Mariana was talking about before. Again, it's still going to be limited because I don't think any school is going to be allowed to allow the students to free range and determine what the curriculum looks like, but they get a voice on how that's rolled out. But again, it's definitely developing that space with them. And I know, like, I'm thinking about that context for the person who's asked the question for child protection. Your contact is there's a focus there, and it's hard to build those relationships with them. But yeah, I think it's definitely a system problem, structure problem, and you have to have that luxury of time to be able to develop a relationship with schools.
Thank you. I'm just scanning, I've got lots of questions here. I'm just trying to work on which one. I've just got some feedback, which was just a really brilliant session today. The sessions are wonderful. Would love Department of Education in Victoria to fund the program throughout the sector. So that's nice. Just need to find some money.
It would be wonderful.
Yeah. So there is another question, and it is still around the Safer Communities for Children program, which was, how does it work when English is a second language for many children and their families? So I guess this is for you, Ellen.
Yes. So again, a bit twofold. So I was working with the children, and whilst many of the children, English was their second language, engaging with them towards the end of kinder, their English was such that the content was understood and comprehended. And I know that through active listening, responding, asking curious questions. Does anyone know what Kenny Kangaroo did? What happened? What did we talk about last week? Those sort of things. Certainly it was a little bit funny sometimes, like even using bush stories, like using animals that are very not familiar to people in other countries, was very fun. So we would have funny conversations, or even activities like jump around like a kangaroo. I was like, has anyone seen a kangaroo before? Let's jump like a kangaroo. So there is some intricacies there, as I spoke about before, in terms of the parents. That was a limitation, and I really would in future love to have those resources translated, particularly Dari. As I said, we have a large Afghan community, so that would be really supportive. But what was really key was working with those kinder teachers who did have those relationships, and also for many were bicultural, multicultural workers that spoke multiple languages themselves. So we're also having those conversations with the parents and carers, aunties, uncles, grandparents that were coming into the centre. But also a future thing that I would really love when I do this again, is really doing that event at the end of the program and bringing all the community members in, having interpreters, working with the families, and really, really sharing what the young people have generously shared with us. So I think it can be done because I've done it. There are challenges, but there are challenges no matter what you do and who you work with. Jen had her own challenges. Also a multicultural community, less so, but still a multicultural community in a regional area. Merrin, yourself, delivering in First Nations remote communities. We all have different challenges. It's just, I guess, working with our strengths and knowing who to contact for support. Key.
Okay, so I'm just going to start wrapping up now. Thanks very much. Look, as we close, I really want to thank our speakers, Ellen, Jen and Mariana, for sharing their time and expertise, and to Anglicare Victoria for partnering with us. But what we've heard today reminds us that whether it's through protective behaviours, and that's not just around targeting children, but around a whole community approach to protective behaviours, trauma-informed practice, and youth-led advocacy, trust and collaboration are at the heart of creating safer communities for all. Children's voices aren't optional, they're essential if we want to build stronger, safer and more connected communities. So thank you all for joining us, and I hope you leave today with renewed purpose and practical ideas for centering children in your work. So thanks everyone, thanks again to the panelists, and thanks so much to everyone who's joined us. Thank you.